Welcome to AS London's Wellness Academy. Today's video is on the nervous system. Let's begin by looking into what is the nervous system. The nervous system itself is divided into two main parts. You have the central nervous system, which is known as CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, known as the PNS. The peripheral nervous system acts as the lines of communication between the central nervous system and the rest of the body, and it's further subdivided into the somatic and the autonomic nervous system. The central nervous system is composed of the brain and the spinal cord. So let's have a look at the structure. The structure is nervous tissue is composed of nerve cells. These nerve cells are known as neurons. These are attached fibres which transmit nerve impulses. Nerve cells are the basic unit of the system, which everything else is built. Like all cells, they have a membrane containing a nucleus and a cytoplasm, but they have a particular shape. They are long and narrow. Some are very long, up to a metre. Nerve cells are easily damaged by toxins and lack of oxygen. Unlike other cells in the body, they do not usually replace when they die. However, current research suggests that some parts may have the ability to regenerate. We're going to be breaking down the parts of the nerve cell later. You also have neuralgia, which is connective tissue. This supports the neurons, though it's only found in the nervous system. This part does not transmit the nerve impulses. Here is a picture of a nerve cell, so let's go into more detail of the structure. You have the cell body. The cell body is the centre of the neuron, with the part with the nucleus. It has cytoplasm and organelles such as mitochondria. You have your dendrites. Dendrites are nerve fibres. They are like branches. They transmit nerve impulses to the cell body. Most neurons have several dendrites. Then you have your axon, which is a long single nerve fibre. This transmits nerve impulses away from the cell body. Neurons generally have only one axon. Then you've got your myelin sheath. It's made up of white fatty substance. This sheet covers the axon and it insulates the axon. It protects it from pressure and helps speed up the nerve conduction. Then you have your neuromere. This is a fine, delicate membrane and it surrounds the myelin sheath and it helps regenerate nerve endings and the nerve cells. And it's only found in peripheral nerves and not in the brain or the spinal cord. Then you have your nodes of Ranvier. These are gaps in the myelin sheath along the nerve. They speed up the passage of nerve impulses along the fibre. Then you have your end or the feet, also known as axon terminals. The ends of the fibrils, tiny fibres that make up the axon, are expanded, and these are then turned into the axon terminals or end feet. They pass on the axon impulse to the dendrites or to the next neuron. Then you've got your synapse. This is the point where one neuron meets another. A chemical messenger fills the gap between one neuron and the next, and this enables the impulse to be transmitted. We're going to now look at the function. So what does a nerve cell actually do? Nerve cells act as a link in a chain. They're a lot like runners passing one baton to the other. And this is actually working with your information or instruction. So it's passing the information to one nerve cell to the next until it reaches the brain or the part of the body in question. The axon end feet of one cell are close to the dendrites of the next, but they do not actually touch. The baton of the nerve impulses jumps across the gap via neurotransmitters and chemicals are released by the nerve endings. You have a collective function. So individual neurons have the same function throughout the body, and this is to transmit information. But collectively they make up 5 different types of nerves and nervous tissue, which have specific functions. You have the motor or efferent nerves, and these carry impulses from the brain or the spinal cord to muscles or glands. They then act on information or instruction, producing movement or secretion. You have your sensory or afferent nerves, and they carry impulses from all parts of the body to the brain. You have your sensory or afferent nerves. Then you have your mixed, which carry both motor and sensory nerve fibres. The only place mixed fibres are found in the body is the brain and spinal cord, and these are cranial and spinal nerves. You have white matter on the inside of the brain and the outside of the spinal cord. This is made up of bundles of myelinated nerve fibres. And you have grey matter on the outside of the brain and inside of the spinal cord. This is made up of cell bodies and unmyelinated axon and dendrites. Nerve cells transmit and receive impulses through the body. Impulses do not continually run along each nerve but are created in response to internal or external stimuli. Positive changed sodium and potassium ions are present inside and outside of the cell. In a resting axon, the concentration of sodium ions is lower than the cells than in the tissue fluid outside, but the concentration of potassium ions is higher inside than outside. This is maintained by differences in membrane permeability to those ions and the sodium-potassium pump. The overall result is that the inside of the cell has a more negative charge than the outside. Stimuli are detected by sensory receptors. The axon membrane becomes temporarily more permeable to sodium ions which rush in, making the inside of the cell more positive. This electrochemical change continues in waves along the length of the nerve cell. A nerve impulse, after it's passed the resting stage, is restored. So nerve cells communicating by nerve impulses travelling in one direction. The movement of nerve impulses in a single neuron is as follows. The impulse crosses the synapse from the end feet of a cell into the dendrites of the cell. The impulse travels from the dendrites of the cell body and then outergon along the axon to the cell's end feet. It then jumps across the synapse helped by chemical messengers. This process continues along the impulse till the impulse reaches either the brain or the muscle or organ concerned. So we have your central nervous system, and this actually consists of the brain and the spinal cord. And you have the peripheral nervous system, and this is the communication to the central nervous system and divided into two further sections. Let's look into the brain in more detail. The brain is the organ that fills the cranium of the skull. It stopped developing in the 15th year of your life. It is the main mass exercise and control over the body and mind, and it has three different sections: the cerebellum, the cerebrum, and the brain stem. So the cerebrum is the largest structure of the brain, and it's divided into two hemispheres. You have the right and left. The outer layer is made up of folds of grey matter. The folds increase the brain's structure, and this is thus the number of cells inside the grey matter. These fibres connect different parts of the brain together. The functions is that it controls voluntary movement, interprets and perceives conscious sensations like pain, heat and cold, and controls mental activity like memory, intelligence and reasoning. The cerebellum structure is known as the small brain. It's positioned in the posterior cranial fossa behind the pons varioli and below the cerebrum and over the medulla oblongata. It consists of two hemispheres, grey matter on the surface and white matter within. The function is coordinating muscular activity, making sure the movements are smooth and precise, subconsciously controlling and maintaining muscle tone and posture, and maintaining balance and equilibrium of the body. You have the hypothalamus. The structure is situated deep within the cerebrum at the top of the brainstem and the pituitary gland attached to its base. The function helps with the regeneration of the body temperature, water balance and metabolism. The centre for drives and emotions such as thirst, appetite, sex, pain and pleasure. It also regulates the pituitary gland, helping forming the main link between the nervous and the endocrine system. It secretes oxytocin and ADH hormone for storage of the posterior pituitary. So let's look at the brain stem. The brain stem consists of three parts. You have the midbrain, the pons varioli and the medulla oblongata. So the midbrain structure lies between the cerebrum and the cerebellum and is above the pons varioli. It's about 2 centimetres long and consists of nerve cells and fibres. The function is to relay stations to the brain, transmitting messages to and from the spinal cord. The pons varioli is situated in front of the cerebellum, below the midbrain and above the medulla oblongata. It consists of nerve fibres which bridge or hence the gap between the two hemispheres of the cerebellum. The function, like the midbrain, is to transmit messengers to and from the spinal cord and the cerebellum. You have your medulla oblongata. The structure is the lowest part of the brainstem, situated above the spinal cord and below the pons varioli. Its construction is different from the cerebrum and the cerebellum, with white matter on the surface and grey matter in the centre. It's the virtual centre because it controls the action of the heart and lungs. The functions are cardiac centre, controls rate and force of heart contraction. Respiratory centre controls rate and depth of breathing. Vasomatic centre controls constriction and dilation of blood vessels. And the reflex centre responds to irritants, controls vomiting, coughing, sneezing, swallowing. Join us for the next video to look at more detail of the spine.